Of all the revolutions amid the Arab Spring, it is arguably the one with the saddest record. In Syria, the 2011 revolution spiraled into one of the worst wars of our time. 10 years on, the death toll is approaching 400,000, tens of thousands of people also missing. 6 million Syrians have fled and found refuge abroad. There are at least just as many people displaced internally. As for President Bashar al-Assad, he is the only one of all the Arab Spring dictators to still be in place. His regime carries out arbitrary detentions, enforced disappearances, torture and summary executions to silence dissent. Almost to the day after the first demonstrations, a Syrian intelligence agent was sentenced by a German court to 4.5 years in prison for crimes against humanity. It was the first trial in history against the Syrian regime's abuses, a symbolic victory for the victims.
This was an attempt to recognize the rights of the victims who died under torture and the ones who are currently suffering in the prisons of the criminal dictator Bashar al-Assad.
In the case, what really made a difference were photos, particularly those of a defector codenamed Caesar, a photographer from the Syrian military police who fled the country with tens of thousands of pictures of detainees who lost their lives in the prisons of Bashar al-Assad. We'll talk more about those photos shortly. Our reporters, though, have been able to visit Idlib, the last area in northwestern Syria that remains out of the control of the Syrian regime. It's a region that's become refuge for more than 4 million Syrians, prevented from crossing the border into Turkey and escaping the war. A region where thousands of families still have no news of their missing loved ones. Well, Edith Bouvier and James de Copen revisit Idlib for France 24.
The region of Idlib is one of the last enclaves held by the Syrian resistance. Every Friday for the past 10 years, Syrians have gathered together to sing revolutionary songs and speak out on behalf of prisoners. Almost everyone here is searching for news of someone locked up in the regime's prisons. Mohammed Salah is 65 years old. Despite the rain and the nearby pro-Assad bombing raids, he has come to be with other families and help them hold on to their memories of the missing.
I keep hoping that this revolution, these protests and the media attention put the spotlight on the prisoner situation so they may be freed alive and can return to their families. I really hope for that.
According to Amnesty International, around 82,000 people have vanished in the prisons of the regime since the start of the revolution. In Idlib, like in the rest of the country, families have a lot of trouble getting information on the whereabouts and the state of health of their imprisoned loved ones. Mohammed Salah heads to the office of the Free Lawyers of Syria Association with the hope of finding a trace of his nephew, Hassan. This group of lawyers and activists are working across the country to defend the imprisoned, often arrested without reason, rarely facing trial, and often killed in detention due to torture or other mistreatment. Hassan al-Hassan is the director of the Atareb Association. Every day he meets with families of the disappeared and helps them in their search.
Have you had the chance to look at some of the photos to try and identify Hassan?
I don't know if I could recognize him. I don't know.
OK, I'm going to look at some other information you filled in for your research request for Hassan, but I'm going to ask you some more questions in any case. What was the exact date of his arrest?
2012.
Which month?
February. My daughter told me after she'd seen him. When they took him out of his cell, there was a barrier between him and his family. 2 people were helping him walk on both sides. and his feet were dragging on the ground. His health had deteriorated a lot. He asked them not to visit him again.
For what reason?
Because he was going to be tortured after the visit. Do you understand? After their visits, the detainees were tortured. So he asked them not to come back.
Hassan currently deals with more than 800 families, including 300 in the Idlib region.
We encounter quite a few difficulties. There's the security situation in general and the military presence in the region. Conflicts, war, bombings. Our association has managed to gain the trust of the people. We have a lot more people applying now. We never did any advertising. We've become known only thanks to word of mouth.
To help these families, Hassan relies on a large database known as the Caesar files, made up of around 55,000 photographs. They were taken or gathered by a regime deserter while working at the military hospital in Damascus. Hassan has classified them all according to their age and any distinguishing marks he could find.
You need to look at some of the pictures. Some could match up. We'll start by searching through the photos. Then we'll see whether we can gather additional information through the files of former detainees. Do you need to put your glasses on?
This one, even if it was my brother, I wouldn't recognize him. Come and look. This one's so messed up I wouldn't recognize him if it was my own brother. How do you identify him?
We'll just look again quickly.
Yes, I understand.
If we manage to find out any more information from the accounts of former prisoners, we'll be back in touch with you.
Not all detainees were photographed, so Hassan al-Hassan uses testimonies from former prisoners to help move his inquiries forward.
The meeting with this former prisoner is very important because he was in prison between 2013 and 2019. He was imprisoned in 3 different detention centers, the prison in Sednaya and in several other jails.
This is not the first time that Hassan has met with Abdelbaset al-Basatneh. He's a rare case, someone who was freed from prison and returned to their family.
I met one family. They were able to see their son in prison in Sednaya. He was walking with great difficulty. He was called Hassan Mohammed El-Saleh, detained in Sednaya and originally from Homs.
Didn't see him, but I've heard his name before.
You heard his name in prison?
Yes, my fellow prisoners spoke to me about him. They said he was detained with us, but he wasn't in the same cell. He was somewhere else. I never saw him with my own eyes. But now I actually only see with one eye. I have to wear glasses. It wasn't like that before. My memory has also been affected due to torture. But I haven't forgotten anything of what I saw there. I live it over and over again. I never forget what I went through there. Humiliation, torture, lots of things. The only wish I had wasn't to get out. I didn't believe I ever could. I just wanted to die so I could rest.
أنت قوي الله عز وجل بيختبر الأقوياء شكرا لك ماشي نسلم عليك ونمشي مع بعض يلا شعور المعتقل هو شعور
Detention is a painful experience. I've seen it.
أشخاص قابلتهم في حياتي من عائلتي وكان وصفه يعني
The prisoners say it's worse than death.
فوقت حسيت في هدول المعتقلين من خلال اعتقالي
When I felt what they were feeling, having been imprisoned myself for some time, I strongly felt that I had to help these people get out of prison.
هي المعاناة اللي عم بيعانوها لكل شخص يعني
I want to help all those arbitrarily detained and help their families as well, because it affects me a lot.
فيني كثير يعني بداية واثنين هو عملي.
On the other hand, it's my work, and I do it with determination. I want to continue because I have felt the suffering of these people.
لأني حسيت في معاناتهم.
Out on the Syrian streets, all share this invisible wound. The burden of waiting for the return of a husband, a son, a father, after 10 years with no news. Hassan continues his painstaking work. He's now looking for traces of the husband of Amina Abdel Hay. His family think he's still held in Sednaya prison, 30 kilometers from Damascus, one of the worst detention centers of the country.
First, I want to apologize because you are perhaps going to recall some painful memories about the disappearance of your husband. We're going to ask you some questions about that. Will that be a problem?
No, it's not a problem.
Thank you. What year did your husband disappear?
2012? No, 2011.
What's he called? What's his full name?
Abdo Ahmed Mahmoud.
And how did the arrest happen? Do you have the exact date? Was it morning, nighttime?
2 o'clock in the morning.
Can you give me more details?
Someone knocked on our door to tell us that the army was coming to arrest him, to arrest my husband. Suddenly there was a bang on the door. We didn't even have the time to think where he could run to, where he could go. They came, opened the door and entered. They searched the whole house. My father-in-law was sitting on a bench in a corner of the room.
Did they break things in your home? I knew lots of these detainees before their arrest. I still remember them after 10 years.
10 years.
When they arrested him, did you try and find out where he was, and did you get a lawyer?
I asked in Damascus, and they said, if he hasn't done anything, he'll get out. Don't worry.
Who did you ask?
I asked the military police. I went to different detention centers.
You went to Adra prison?
No, on a military base.
In Damascus?
No, not there.
Can you describe to me the families you saw there?
There were people from all regions, not only people from Damascus.
Other provinces?
Yes, people from all over the country. Everyone spoke different dialects.
For information about their kids?
They came to get a document to be able to get into the prison, to be able to get information on their children. I went 3 times. Twice they didn't let me in. So I kept searching. Every time I was told he could be in another place. I went to Sednaya once.
Did you manage to get into Sednaya prison?
No, I just walked in near where the prisoners were being interrogated. I stayed where they were being questioned. They had their hands cuffed. They brought them in one by one to question them. There were lots of people around. I was waiting, just hoping for my son to appear, that they would question him and set him free.
Did you look in the Caesar files? Did you try and find your husband? Did you look at everything?
We didn't find anything.
Usually it's the wife or mother who does the research and manages to track down and identify their husband or son. So between the year of his arrest and all the years that have passed, his facial features must have changed a lot.
Yes, after 10 years, I don't know if I would recognize him. I hope every day that he will come home. It's helped me to be with my in-laws and children. They haven't forgotten. They hope he will come back. They tell me all the time, I hope Daddy comes back one day. They're waiting for him. They ask if Daddy is going to get out of prison soon.
Hassan's investigations have so far identified 30 men from the Caesar files. His information is then sent to authorities in France and other countries. Since 2018, Paris has opened an investigation into the Syrian regime for suspected crimes against humanity based on these photos and witness accounts.
Edith Bouvier and James de Copen revisiting Idlib for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. You can, of course, catch it and all the previous editions as well on our website at france24.com. Thanks very much for watching. More news coming up very shortly.